pense que les gens ont compris que dans un moment comme
people have understood that at this time, and the last time we saw this, we were quite young. Our parents and grandparents saw this the last time. Our grandparents built modern Canada, and now it's up to us to build the Canada of the future. The global economy is in transformation, and the world has changed a lot in the last few weeks. So we need to ensure that Canada will be resilient for the long term. It's a growth budget, and a budget that will be filled with an economic vision that will make Canada an economic country of the future. We need to spend more so that we have the financial capacity to invest. People understand that when we go to the grocery store, we spend money or buy a home, that's an investment. So we're trying to balance the operating budget. And people understand that faced with the tariff threats from the U.S., we need to first protect our workers, protect our industries, and protect the Canadian economy. And now we really need to make the economy pivot, just like we did in 1945. And I would say there's a parallel between those two periods. As we saw back in those days, we had to rebuild Canada's economy. Is debt interest worry for you? Like it was for past generations? Yes, we are looking at that, but when we say that we're going to have the most resilient economy in the G7, people need to understand that to get there, we need to invest. We need to reduce spending so we can invest more. People need to understand that we need to give ourselves the fiscal capacity to do so. We'll be rigorous in our spending, but judicious in our investments, because we need to grow the economy.
In French, the distinction that Mr. Carney wanted to make between operational spending and I can't remember the other word.
Capital investment.
Thank you very much. How are we going to see that reflected in the budget?
It's going to be very clear. We're going to be presenting to Canadian what we call the operational spend and the capital investment. And to make it simple, Canadians understand, when you buy a house, you invest. When you go to the grocery, you spend. And what I say is that this budget is going to be a generational investment in Canada. There is a lot of parallel that I can make between 1945 and 2025 at a time where our largest trading partner, neighbor, is turning its back on Canada. We had to make significant investments to protect our workers, protect our industry, and now it's going to be that collective effort we need to make sure that Canada is going to be resilient in this new world economic order. We're in the middle of global trade war. We need to make sure that we make smart investment, and the way to do that is that we say we're going to be rigorous in our expenses so we can be ambitious in our investments. So you want to spend less so you have more capital to invest. And the type of things, that you've seen, we talk about major nation-building project. We're talking about infrastructure. We're talking about housing. The type of thing that will give a return on our investment to make sure that we are resilient as a nation.
Maybe it's an odd set of coincidences, but the last time we had a fiscal update from this country was also the day that Francois-Philippe quit. And then today, Francois-Philippe quit, and you chose to announce the date today. I wonder if there's a reason you've announced the date today.
There's no connection between the two. I thought it was, I've always said that we want to be transparent with Canadians, to be upfront. I'm not sugarcoating anything. I've said this is going to be a generational investment. We're going to have to make tough choices. We're going to be asking from Canadians to work together with us because they understand this is a transformational moment. This is nothing like business as usual. There's nothing business as usual in the world economy. And I can tell you, even on Friday, Canada has been invited for one of the first time to join the finance ministers in Europe to be discussing the world situation with Ukraine, the United Kingdom, and Norway. Because everyone understands that now the fiscal capacity of our, many nations around the world is constrained. When you look at the comparative advantage of Canada, I'm very confident about this country. We attract a lot of talent. We build ships, we build cars, we build planes. We have critical minerals. We have abundant energy. We're the only G7 which has a free trade agreement with all the other G7 nations. So, when I preside the G7 economic minister and finance minister, the fundamentals are strong. But now, a bit like CDAO did it in 1945, now we need to reinvent ourselves. This is nothing like business as usual. We need to be ambitious in our investment, like I said, and rigorous in our expenses. I could not hear you.
The Assembly of First Nations warned today that if program funding is cut to First Nations, your major projects agenda isn't going to move forward as smoothly as you would hope, because they're going to be a worse off position. What cuts can First Nations expect in this budget?
Well, I'd say we're going to work hand in hand with First Nations. You know, that's why we presented these projects of national interest. We very much want to work with First Nation. I met with the Inuit representative yesterday. I'm going to be meeting with the chief of the Assembly of First Nation. We want to work with our First Nation partners, because I think this is a moment to rebuild Canada. And at this particular moment in history, you want to work with First Nation. This is all about economic reconciliation. This is a moment where First Nation will be part of building this new Canada of the 21st century. This is like a moment in our history, like I would say never before, where now you're putting the foundation for a resilient Canada for generations to come. And I'm glad that First Nations will be a partner in designing the future of the economy of Canada.
What budget cuts can they expect?
The U.S. senators said that they wanted the DST actually repealed from this government, and your government made a commitment to do so in the fall to them. How is that going to happen? Is that going to be through this budget, or what mechanism will you be using to permanently remove the DST?
Well, we've been very clear, you know, at the time with the U.S. administration, with the President of the United States about our intention to remove the digital service taxes. Obviously, at the time, we explained to them that under our parliamentary process, we would need to pass legislation. But I've already instructed the Canada Revenue Agency to, implement the decision of the government. So I would say this is very clear. And we're going to take the steps at the appropriate time, obviously, to enshrine that in legislation.
So no legislation as well? No legislation.
Well, like I said, we're going to take the appropriate legislative vehicle to achieve that. But I would tell you that there's no concern. We have been able to clarify with those who would have paid in advance. You know, some had already paid. We issued a directive. We've been very clear with them. So I think it's well understood by the industry that the decision by the Government of Canada has already been implemented, like I said, by the Revenue Agency, and we'll follow that with the appropriate legislative process.
What are you going to use to get rid of it?
Listen, there's many ways you can do that. We'll either include that in one of the bill, or which is probably more likely than not, and then we will effect that. But for all intent and purposes, my point is that this is already known and accepted and implemented by the Revenue Agency. So there's really no issue. Then it's about implementing that in legislation.
On the transparency piece of all of this, I asked you yesterday, I'll ask you again, and maybe it was this morning. How transparent are you going to be with Canadians about what you're cutting? Will they know this program, this service, these jobs, or is it just going to be money that disappears or is reprofiled?
We'll be as transparent as we can be. I think Canadians would want to see, like I said, Canadians have been tightening their belt for quite some time. It's only normal that the federal government does the same. We've been expanding government for the good part of the last decade, and families, I know, have been tightening their belt. Workers have been tightening their belt. So what we're saying is that what we're asking from Canadians needs to be reflected also at the Government of Canada. This is being more efficient, using technology, reviewing processes, making sure that, I would say, we offer services of the 21st century with technology of the 21st century. Many of our systems date back to the 20th century. So it's about, making sure that we better serve Canadians and use all the tools available to do that. And at the same time, be very rigorous in our expenses. And we'll be as transparent as we can, telling Canadians what we do. A good example would be the Revenue Agency. When I saw that the service level was not acceptable, I've asked the agency and the board to put a 100-day plan to rectify the situation. And we're going to produce an update report so Canadians can see. So that's the kind of transparency I want to show to Canadians, because you know what? This is going to require collective effort. We're going to rebuild this nation like we did in 1945. So obviously you have to tell Canadians what this is about. This is a generational moment. I think, like I said, our grandparents did it. and it's our time for this generation to do it.
Monsieur Champagne, pour mes collègues de Québec, il y a une sortie de l'UMQ, des maires, mairesses, industrie touristique.
When it comes to the mayors in Quebec, talking about the increase in temporary workers for the tourism industry because they cannot meet those needs. Will you bring the thresholds up and bring it back to 20%? When it comes to temporary foreign workers, as you know, during the summer, we spoke about that during pre-budget consultations. I met also with representatives of the UMP. We'll get a chance to talk more about that because that's something that we're looking at now. But we're still listening to our partners.